Welcome to the Truckers and Nerds podcast, where we connect real-life truckers with freight tech companies to discuss technological innovations in the trucking industry. The Truckers and Nerds podcast is hosted by Tobenna Arodiogbu, CEO and founder of CloudTrucks. This podcast is brought to you by CloudTrucks.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Truckers and Nerds podcast. Today we are here with Ellen Voie from Women in Trucking. Ellen, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so excited to have you on today. Before we kind of dive into things, I thought it would be great to hear more about your story and your background and how you came to be the founder of Women in Trucking.
Well, I'll give you the long version. Actually, in high school, I took shop class. And so I ended up working at a steel fabricating plant, designing material handling equipment, which is pallets and racks and stuff. And they came to me one day and said they asked me to move into the traffic department. And they said they would send me to school for traffic and transportation management. So that's really how I was introduced to the trucking industry. I worked for them for a number of years and then used my education to do licensing and permitting for 18 years while I raised my family. During that time, I got my bachelor's and my master's in communication as well. So went to work for an organization called Trucker Buddy International. It's a pen pal program. And then I was recruited by Schneider. And they said I was the manager of retention and recruiting programs, so corporate level initiatives. And one of the initiatives was how to attract and retain non-traditional groups. And one of the groups they were focusing on was women. And so they said, figure out what brings women into the industry. Why do women leave? Specifically focusing on the driver population. And at the time I was getting my pilot's license and I belonged to a women's aviation organization. So it struck me that there wasn't one for women in the trucking industry. So in 2007, I started in 2006, put together a board of directors, got an attorney to do all the paperwork. And in March of 2007 was our very first meeting where we wrote our mission statement, set the bylaws. And here we are 14 years later. Women in trucking is moving forward.
That's great. Schneider, I heard that their trucks are called the pumpkin trucks.
That's correct. There's another funny thing as well. If you see the orange cones, the barrels on the side of the road, those are called Schneider eggs. So if you hit one, a Schneider truck pops out.
That's awesome.
Not really, but
yeah. Yeah. All right. So what's the mission? The mission of Women in Trucking, and I would love to hear more about kind of the state of things today.
So the mission, when we created the organization, has always stayed the same. It's three parts. It's first to encourage the employment of women in the industry. Secondly, to address obstacles. What obstacles are keeping women from succeeding or even entering the industry? And the third part is to celebrate success, which means we're telling their stories and we're talking about the pioneers and we're sharing their accomplishments as well. So the mission, encourage employment, address obstacles, and celebrate success.
Yeah, that's a great mission. So let's talk a little bit about the obstacles, because even today, you said you founded your organization in 2007. But, here we are, 2021, and I've definitely heard from some women in the industry talking about some of the challenges that they face. Curious to hear what some of those challenges were that you saw those years ago that led to you starting the organization, and kind of what you still see today in the industry.
That's a great question. So 14 years ago, when I'd speak in front of trucking executives, they would insist that they just hired the best person, that they didn't care about age, gender, ethnicity. But then I'd start pointing out, well, okay, but your uniforms are all made for men. The trucks were designed for men. A lot of women couldn't even have access to showers and restrooms and truck stops years ago because they were like a locker room. So we started pointing out things like that. And so some of the changes, the truck cab manufacturers have actually been very receptive to making sure that women feel as comfortable in the cab of a truck as men. And that means women typically have shorter arms and legs and wider hips. So they have to be able to reach the pedals as well as see over the dash and see the mirrors, and open the hood, be able to open the hood. So they added hydraulics. The other thing was the truck stops, very open-minded into how they can make things better. And one truck stop chain put in hair dryers and big fluffy towels and big shower heads. And guess what? Men like fluffy towels as well. So it's not just, for women. But one of the things that is still a concern, and that is safety. We did a best practices survey, and on a scale of 1 to 10, we asked our female drivers how safe they feel. And the response averaged 4.4. And more recently, we did a survey where we were asking drivers where they feel least safe. And the number one response was at truck stops. So we need to make sure that women feel safe. And if that means educating them on don't park in the back, don't park in the dark, don't walk between trucks, carry something, walk with a purpose, things like that. And more lighting and more fencing, possibly more security personnel. And then also that means what is the company's culture? I mean, if a driver is driving and says, well, I feel uncomfortable because a snowstorm is coming or a tornado is in the area or there's protests going on, does the carrier actually let the driver pull over and stay out of the situation? And then finally, where are they sending the drivers? Like what part of a city, is it a part of a city that may have some negative activity going on in that neighborhood, or, an unlit part of, an area that doesn't have security. So it's really about keeping our drivers safe, their personal safety, as well as the safety of the vehicles around them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's interesting. It's good to hear that you've had some positive reception from various folks in the industry, and I think some of the things that you pointed out are things that people probably don't think about on a day-to-day basis. I mean, going all the way to the truck manufacturers and making sure that these trucks are being built with women in mind as well. I can see how that can go a really long way. And then what you were describing with the truck stops and safety in the truck stops. It's very interesting.
Well, and the other thing that 14 years ago, there was never any data. Nobody ever separated their data into gender. And now they are. And we're finding that female drivers, commercial drivers, are actually safer than male commercial drivers. And women are often better with the equipment and customers and paperwork. And so they're seeing the value that women bring to the industry, which that's a very positive momentum.
Oh, that's great. But 40%, I think that was what you said earlier, 40% of women reported that they felt safe at the truck stops. So it sounds like there's still a lot of work to do going into the future. So what's your vision for women in the trucking industry kind of going forward? Well,
we work with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, and they're doing a 3-year crimes against female and minority drivers study. So the study is being done this year. The results should come out early next year. And we also, in the infrastructure bill, there's legislation to create a women in trucking advisory committee at the federal level as well. And so it would be other organizations helping us advance our mission. And bringing attention to, what women bring to the industry and why women aren't coming into the industry. So I want to work with the truck stops on and like a here's something, say something program, where if someone hears a driver being harassed or, provoked, that they step in and say that's unacceptable, because we all need to stick up for each other.
Right. Definitely. How do you see technology playing a role in all of this? And I'm kind of curious if you've seen any positive technological advancements over the years and whether there are any things that you're excited about going into the future.
Yes. And when people talk about driverless trucks or autonomous vehicles, I don't think we'll see that in my my lifetime, very common anyway. I mean, there are some applications, but the driver's still important, especially if there's a snowstorm or construction or things like that. But all the technology that the autonomous vehicle movement is bringing to the industry, the LiDAR, the radar, the anti-collision, the anti-rollover, all that technology that is coming into the industry makes it a safer place. And since we need to make sure that our drivers are safe, men and women, the technology removes some of the driver error. And so that's a good thing. It keeps the driver safe, the equipment safe, and the roads safe, which means the motoring public safer. So I'm all for technology. And also not just safety, but it also makes it a less physically demanding job when you can use technology like hydraulic lifts on the hood, so the more technology we can use to make it less physically demanding, because we have an aging workforce, maybe we can keep them in the industry longer by not taxing their bodies, to do physical lifting or cranking or things like that.
Yeah. No, that's the stuff that you said about the autonomous driving. That's kind of what I generally say is that the advancements are overall positive because we will see increased safety in the industry, fewer accidents overall. It's almost like having an additional guide system on the vehicle, right? And getting some help there. And for the people who are business owners and care about the additional impacts there, it should lead to lower cost of insurance, which is great overall for the industry, I think. But it's always fascinating to me also when you talk about the hardware advances that people just don't really think about, right? Like the hydraulic system on the hood to make it easier to kind of lift these things, because otherwise they're extremely heavy. And that's not something that people think about on a day-to-day basis, but you're absolutely right that those are also technological advancements that are great. Anecdotally, at CloudTrucks, we have women who work with us as well. And we found that there are other software advancements that they love, like not needing to negotiate with a broker directly, because sometimes, both for what we've heard from women or from immigrants, sometimes is that when you're on the other side of that negotiation and maybe the other party hears that you're a woman or if you're an immigrant, they are not quite as forthcoming in these negotiations. So we've heard from some women saying, "Hey, I actually don't really want to do those things." So these advancements where you have apps and you can just book your jobs directly seems to be positive, at least from my point of view or from what I've heard so far.
Well, you're totally correct. One of the things about negotiating is that women typically are less likely to negotiate. And there's been books written about it. One's called Women Don't Ask. And it's about how negotiating is uncomfortable for women. And I'm generalizing here, but because women are collaborative and team oriented. So women look at negotiating as a me versus them type thing, which isn't the case. But men look at negotiating like, well, I'm going to get the best out of this because I deserve this. And so we need to be more like the guys and say, no, I need to look out for myself. But that's one of the things that we talk about, like at our conference, and, refine your negotiation skills and don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah. Let's talk about some other things that maybe women face in the industry. I'm curious about your thoughts on being a truck driver and raising a family, right? Especially over the road trucking, which can be, can keep you away from home for days and in some cases weeks. How do you view that part of the industry or that part of the job really affecting, how many women decide to become truck drivers? I'm curious what you're seeing and hearing there as well.
Yeah, that's a great question, because the average female coming into the industry these days is in her early 50s, and she's typically raised her family. And 83% of women who come into the industry do so because of a family member or friend. So that means that a husband, a boyfriend, somebody in their life said, hey, the kids are grown, go get your CDL, come out on the road with me. And that's very typical. And so the family aspect of getting home isn't as great. But to get more younger women in the industry, which is a huge focus, there are jobs out there that don't require you being away from home, like hauling trash or making local deliveries or milk truck or delivering fuel. And like we have one of our image team members, she has 6 children and she hauls bulk and has raised her family. So it can be done. You just have to ask the right questions and make sure that you go to the right carriers that can accommodate that family. And there's one other thing. Those who have a strong family network at home, there are women who drive trucks who have husbands who are at home. I mean, in the past, it was the husband who was driving and the woman was at home with the kids. Well, that's flipped for many couples these days. So, if you have, or maybe the female driver has a strong family network, maybe a sister or mom or dad or somebody who's willing to watch her kids when she's on the road. So either running locally or having a strong family structure to help you is very important.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. We have someone that we work with, Clarissa Rankin. In fact, we started a podcast with her. She has a podcast called The Way In, and she actually falls exactly into the categories. One of the categories that you mentioned, where she's the one driving the truck. Her husband is at home. They have a young son, I believe, and so the podcast is very interesting because they're talking about their family life and how they made this decision and how they work together. And I think some of the other owner operators that we work with, we've seen similar things as well, whether it's, some who are older and they've raised their kids, or some who just have a really strong family network at home. So they go out, they're on the road for a week or two, and then they go back and they spend a week with their family. And during that time, they have other family members kind of stepping in. Do you find that there are young women are interested in some of the opportunities that you mentioned? So some of those local deliveries or regional deliveries, is that something that appeals to them, given kind of what we're hearing about, the aging of the industry overall?
Yeah, actually, social media is helping us attract more millennials. I mean, we recently put women in trucking on TikTok, and you would not believe how many female drivers are on TikTok. But reaching them by social media, and also a lot of them, many years ago, female professional drivers didn't want to be noticed. They just want to do their job, make their delivery and not call attention to themselves. Well, that's changed. And I love it that these female drivers are sharing their stories on social media and telling their stories on Facebook and, Twitter and TikTok and all the, Instagram. And so other young women are seeing that and saying, oh, that looks kind of cool. I want to check that out. So it's helping. Yeah.
Some of my favorite trucking videos are on TikTok. And I don't even use TikTok, so it's been great seeing that. I had no idea that there was this large trucking community and really exciting videos on TikTok. It's amazing. Everyone should check that out. I think it's great.
It's huge. TikTok is really the up and coming.
Yeah, for sure. So if there was anything you could change about the trucking industry, what would it be?
Well, I would want to change the image. People outside the industry look in the trucking industry and think, oh, well, that's a male-dominated environment. It's smokestacks and diesel engines. It's outdated. They don't realize that technology that's in the truck and around the truck and connected to the truck. They also don't realize that it's not your grandpa's job anymore. You're not loading and unloading. You're not traveling, coast to coast, because it's a lot more regional and local. And the equipment has changed. I mean, automated transmissions weren't even around 20 years ago or 25 years ago. And so if we could give them a glimpse of the inside of the truck and the trucking lifestyle and how it's changed. And that's one of the things that we created a Girl Scout transportation patch so young girls can learn about careers in transportation and think about it at an early age. And the activity book that goes with it talks about how the grain from the field goes to the bakery in a truck, and from bakery to packaging in a truck. And so we want kids to look at our industry and say, that could be my cookies in there, or that could be the milk, in that tanker that I'm drinking with my cookies, or whatever. We want them to have a personal connection so that they think about this industry.
Yeah. We over here just recruiting people who are engineers or operations or whatever other role, and trying to explain the trucking industry. Maybe I should learn more from the cookies and the grain story that you have. Maybe we should have something like that we use to explain this to people. But yeah, it's really challenging trying to explain the impacts of trucking, because I find that most people want to understand the impact of the job that they're doing. And so we face this challenge as well. But one of the things that I noticed was that last year, people started to take notice of trucking way more than they ever had. I think it was right around the time when people were having trouble getting toilet paper at the stores, and they started thinking, wait, how do these toilet paper typically get here? And everyone started paying attention to trucks and how all this stuff moves. And it certainly made it easier for us to get more people interested in CloudTrucks as a company, but in trucking as a whole.
Oh, you're right. But what they weren't thinking about was how the poor professional drivers had the rest areas closed, so they couldn't even stop at a rest area. Yes. And they couldn't go to a sit-down restaurant. You couldn't drive through a drive-through. I mean, the challenges that our drivers went through, I hope that the extra attention because of the pandemic will continue.
Yes.
That's my wish. I had one driver say that he had never had anyone clap and cheer when he pulled into a store. But during the pandemic, when it first started, he had a load of toilet paper on the back of his trailer he was delivering to a store. And when they saw him pull in, they were clapping and cheering.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right that there's more awareness needed overall. So what's the biggest challenge that you see that truck drivers face today, women especially?
Well, I would say the biggest challenge is that they feel underappreciated. They feel overregulated. They feel like all the regulations are making their life more difficult, and they feel like they don't have a say in it. And unfortunately, that's the case. But I would encourage all professional drivers, contact your legislators. We do ride-alongs. We give ride-alongs to our elected officials and our legislators, our regulators, and media, because we want them to see a little glimpse into the life of a professional driver. And even if it just helps change the perception one at a time. And one other thing that I find that is moving in a positive direction is the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration has a Motor Carrier Safety Advisory Committee, which I sit on. But for the first time ever, they created a subcommittee that's just drivers. And we have 3 drivers on that subcommittee. So the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration is actually listening to drivers in order to help solve some of the challenges that they're facing on the road. So that's moving in a positive direction.
Yeah, I was chatting with our VP of Safety. I think this was 2 days ago, and there's this thing that happens. It happens once every few months. I learn about some regulation in trucking, and I'm stunned by it, and I keep asking myself, how are the owner operators even doing this? It's just so much to take in. People want to do the right thing, but there's just there's just so much that you have to keep in your head. You have to get like alcohol permits to drive through certain states or into certain states. You have to get an intrastate permit and an interstate permit. And like, there's just all of this stuff that it's so hard for anyone to kind of keep up. Especially given that they also have to do the grueling job of actually driving the truck, right? And it's so much. So I definitely hear you there, and I'm glad that the FMCSA is working with drivers and working with folks like you as well. So what's next?
I'll tell you, it's much easier.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say it's easier these days because you can actually apply for all those permits online. When I was doing them 25 years ago, it was all done on paper.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. So what's next for women in trucking? What are you looking towards for the rest of the year? What's coming over the next few years?
So we created a driver ambassador program, and Schneider donated the use of a truck and driver. Kelly Lynn McLaughlin is our driver ambassador. She drives for them 2 weeks out of the month, and one week out of the month works for us. And we're having a trailer retrofitted, and it'll be a hands-on learning environment, including a simulator. So we'll take it to schools and shows, and people will be able to walk in there and learn about the trucking industry themselves. And secondly, we're creating chapters so that people can continue to meet for the other members of Women in Trucking at local and regional events. We're having our first one in Pennsylvania this fall. So I'm really excited about creating the chapters and moving forward on that. So lots of things coming in the future. Nice.
Is there a way that I can play around with one of these simulators? That actually sounds like a lot of fun.
Absolutely. It'll be in the trailer. So we'll have to make sure that you see it.
Nice. That's great. Yeah. And Ellen, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. I would love to see find ways that CloudTrucks can actually work closely with women in trucking, and we certainly share a lot of the same views that you have about how to get more women into the trucking industry, how to make women feel safer in the trucking industry, and how to get young people into the industry as well. Because I think I truly believe that it's one of the great middle class jobs, and we need to be educating people about it and getting more people excited about it and talking about the change that technology is making. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing, and thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me on.